We have a really odd situation at this moment in history that I think might have been approached one or two times in our country's history before, but I'm not sure if it's ever been exactly like this, where we have certain problems that have been around for decades, and everybody's arguing back and forth about what to do about it. And no matter what, it just goes around and around and around. The answers, people propose solutions. The answers, nothing happens. And, decades later, we're still arguing about the same exact things. You could look at the newspaper from 1973, and everybody's having the exact same arguments that they're having today, with no progress to be made. Whereas in the past, when they had these huge controversies, something would eventually be decided on, and 20 years later, everybody would pretend that they always believed whatever the solution was, that we always believed in that. Interestingly, this is a theme that you see in a lot of stories where the original society is said to be ideal, and the society that our ancestors lived in many ways, the stories that they tell are trying to go back to the ideal of an older time. So Tsimshian was supposed to be this ideal civilization, Northwest Coast Indian civilization. And the people of this town were just amazingly productive at everything that they did. And one thing that they did very well was hunting. And hunting, while it's sort of believed that all Indians are great hunters, in reality on the Northwest Coast, hunting was a specialty. It was not something that everyone did for a living. We were fishermen. However, there were certain people who that was their profession. That was their what they were known for, and they would go out into the woods and they would hunt. And the hunters of Tsimshian, being at Tsimshian, were especially good. So they would go out and they would hunt, and they would just have enormous success. And all of the animals found themselves in distress because the hunters of Tsimshian were so good that there was a real fear that all of the animals would be wiped out and there would be no more animals. So they decided to have a big conference. And the purpose of this conference was to have everyone agree on a petition that they would send up a prayer to Simoigat Kamlachaga, the Lord of Heaven. And everyone had to agree on this, because once that ruling came down, that would be the rule. So everyone agreed that they would decide together on what this prayer would be. The animals quickly found themselves divided into two camps. There were the big animals, represented most loudly by Bear, who also saw himself as the leader of the entire conference. And there were the small animals. And they didn't really have a leader exactly, but one person among them did decide to speak up when it seemed to him that nobody else was going to. And that was Porcupine. Now, Bear and the larger animals realized that if only there was a change in the weather, this would be the perfect solution. If it was winter all year around, if we did something about the temperature, the hunters would have a lot harder time. They wouldn't be able to just go out and hunt everybody because it would be so cold. And so they all agreed, this is what we're going to have to do. In order to survive, we're going to have to ask some Oigat Kamlachaga to make sure that it's always winter. 300. Now the small animals were alarmed at this, because they saw that the bigger animals were absolutely in agreement with this. If it was winter, then the humans could not come out and hunt. They'd never be able to come out and hunt. The little animals didn't eat the big animals. In fact, they tended to eat the little plants and the insects and gather nuts and roots and different things like that the big animals didn't care about. And if it was winter all the time, this stuff would go away. It would be a lot harder on the little animals. And it can't be winter every day if they're going to survive. So they went back and forth about this, and the two sides just couldn't agree. And finally, Bear, he was getting a little frustrated, so he stood up and he said, "This is a major catastrophe. The humans are incredibly bloodthirsty hunters. We absolutely must solve this problem. This issue has to be dealt with. And we're proposing a solution that will absolutely get rid of all of the hunters forever. There can't be any hunters in the dead of winter. So this is clearly the best solution." Now, Porcupine, when he saw that none of the other smaller animals would agree with him, though all the bigger animals were nodding their heads and, "Oh yeah, we really need to, this is the prayer that we need to send up." Porcupine just couldn't believe it. He shook his head and he stood up and he said, "If it's winter all the time, we small animals will not be able to eat. We won't be able to forage for the food that we need. Our small bodies, we will suffer in the cold a lot worse than you bigger animals will. This is something that we can't endorse at all. We cannot agree." And to show his sincerity, to show that he really meant it, he took his thumb and he bit it off and he spit it into the fire. And everybody was impressed. Whoa, he really believes what he's talking about. If he is willing to do that, he's not joking around. And that was kind of impressive, but Bear, he was Bear. He's stubborn. Thank you for spitting your thumb into the fire, but we need to survive. We will not survive this if we don't change things. Things cannot be the way they are now. There has to be a radical change, and this radical change that we're proposing will solve the problem completely. And Porcupine, he listened for the second time, and for the second time he just couldn't believe what he was hearing. It was like Bear didn't hear what he said at all. And so Porcupine just repeated it. No, you're not getting it. You're not getting it. If we have to go through winter, look at the little ant. The ant can't even come out when it's winter time. If it's winter all the time, we will suffer. We can't have it. That's not the answer at all. And to show that he was serious, he took his other hand and he bit off his other thumb and he spit that into the fire. And again, that was pretty impressive. Biting off your thumb and spitting it into the fire, that will get attention. Bear just shook his head. Why won't you listen to what we're saying? We are the big animals of the forest. In many ways, we are the forest. As the big animal, when I go through and I knock over brush and trees and things like that, I create room for you little animals to live and exist. If it wasn't for the big animals, you wouldn't be able to survive. And we are dying. And we need this solution. Winter all the time is the only answer. It's what we need. Porcupine knew that if they didn't all agree, the prayer wouldn't work. Everybody had to agree or the prayer wouldn't work. So the bigger animals were getting frustrated that the little animals were not agreeing, but they still couldn't change their mind. They couldn't change their mind because to agree to what the bear was saying was to sign their own death sentences. They would all die. And so again, Porcupine explained all of that. We can't do what you're asking. That cannot be the answer. Everything in Northwest Coast Indian stories happens 4 times if it's important. So when somebody like me is telling a story and they say something 4 times, really listen to that. So the 4th time, Bear, he's just absolutely frustrated. He cannot believe how crazy, evil, or stupid Porcupine and all the small animals are. You want us to die. I don't understand why you want us to die. You don't even care that the hunters are killing us. They're not coming after you. The hunters aren't trying to kill and slaughter all the porcupines and all of the little mice and everything else. No, they're going after the big animals, the deer, the wolf, the bear. You're not at risk here. In fact, it doesn't really concern you. Now, when Porcupine heard this, each time, of course, he was getting angrier and angrier, but now he had just lost it. And he didn't even wait to make his point. He took his last foot and he bit off the thumb and he spit it into the fire. And then he made his last statement. Just because we don't accept your solution, it doesn't mean we're not interested in solving the problem. You're not hearing us. You will die if it's not winter every day. We will die if it is. So we can't agree. And finally, the bigger animals realized that there was something to what Porcupine was saying. And his demonstrations of biting off of all 4 of his thumbs and spitting them into the fire, it was kind of hard not to respect that sacrifice. And finally they agreed that they would make this prayer to some Aigat Kamlechaga, the Lord of Heaven, that would be a perfect compromise. It would be cold weather 6 months every year, and it would be warm weather 6 months every year. So, in thinking about this big, great debate, where both sides are essentially right, what is it that they did to solve this problem that no one seems to do anymore with the big problems of our day? I'm your friendly neighborhood Ravenspeaker saying, dem algeg nietsen.